Okay. In the last two segments of this overview of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we discussed the scrolls themselves and talked about the history, how they were found, the contents, the relationship to the Bible, and so forth. This time, we want to now show the scrolls in the context of the Accordance Bible software. What are the resources that Accordance has related to the scrolls, and how do you use these resources? The first one I want to start with is the non-biblical scrolls, because you remember we divided the scrolls into biblical and non-biblical, and we'll start with the non-biblical scrolls here. I might add that the electronic text of Accordance is fully grammatically tagged, and it includes, to our knowledge, the complete corpus of the Dead Sea Scrolls, including small fragments. The word limit, I believe, if the fragment you couldn't identify a single letter, that was about where they stopped, but they even tried to do tiny fragments where even words were not necessarily recognizable. And to my knowledge, this includes all fragments. And so here's the text. We are presenting it here in parallel with Hebrew on the left and English on the right. And you notice as I put the cursor over the word, it gives the parsing here at the bottom, the grammatical parsing. Here's the word shim'u, and you see it's shama is the verb lemma, and it's a column perfect masculine plural, to hear or to obey. And so it starts out ve'ata shim'u kol yodei tzedek. And now listen, all of those who know righteousness. And that was my rough translation. I don't know how they translate it on the right. But anyway, so it's a fully grammatical tag text. And what I'd like to do now is to do a few searches in Qumran. And we put the English on the right so you can follow this search in English. And we'll do the search in Hebrew. And we'll start out here with the famous expression, sons of light. Now, this works just like other Hebrew searches, that if you don't do anything, it assumes the lexical form or the lemma here. And so I'm just going to put the word ben here and then follow it with the word or. Okay, and let's see what we get. And there we found quite a few places. And what's interesting is that I mentioned that this expression is mainly used in the War Scroll 1QM, but here you see immediately I've got searches of that same expression in 1QS. This is the rule of the community, and also in a few fragments, 4Q177, 4Q286. Now, one of the things that's neat in Accordance also is that we can do a plot here, and I'll open up the plot, and you can do this on any text here. I'll open up the hits graph, and you see indeed that here's a plot of the entire Qumran corpus. You don't see too much on the right, and all these little lines represent each little manuscript Qumran, but you see the clustering here in 1QS and 1QM. In fact, I think I'm not going to fiddle with this, but we can actually zoom in and change the way, the style of the graph and so on. But this is an example now with a famous expression, and I did say the last time, the word, the sons of light, is not mentioned anywhere in ancient manuscripts except for Qumran in the New Testament. If I were to do this search literally, I would have a quote mark around it, but then I wouldn't find it, you see, because it always uses the word in plural. So I'll say b'nai, or because it's what's called a smichut in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, it's a word pair of two nouns together. And now indeed, I said b'nai or literally, which is what the inflected searching is, and I find the same type of result. Now, one thing that's interesting in Accordance also is that I can change the search parameters here. I can go to Qumran, and we have quite a few texts here. Of course, all of the salespeople here would love if you want to add text to the Qumran, to what you own. But let's look up the Qumran English, non-biblical English. And now you notice I've made in the upper left the search text in English. And now I can do in English, sons of light. And indeed, I now did the search in English. It's highlighted in English, but you see the verses now from the translation that are equivalent in Hebrew here. We don't have cross-highlighting here because we haven't grammatically or added Strong's numbers. I'm not sure we could even do that in the English Bible. Now let me just show a couple of other types of searches that we can do. Let's go back to the Qumran. In fact, I think I can just do recent and it'll bring me back to that. No, it didn't. I think I have to change the text here. So we'll just go back to Qumran, bring that right back. There we go. And now I'll show you a couple of other things here. Let's look at the word bara. Very easy to create. And you see it's mentioned a lot. In fact, it has 75 hits, which is about what the Bible has. If I open up just another tab temporarily here of the Hebrew Bible, here we go, right here, I'll open up Recents and do the same search here for bara. I now get 54, actually a little bit less. And if you drew a plot of this, search for bara, you'll see that bara mainly occurs here in the book of Genesis and in the book of Isaiah. And I could expand this here on the chart. Let's do that. There you see the plot expanded here where you see it's mainly clustered around Genesis and Isaiah. But if I do the same thing now for the Qumran, which we'll go back to here and do bara and do a plot here, a hits graph of that. Now I'll expand this to fill the screen. And now you see that it's used a little bit more evenly here. It's clustered again in the War Scroll, but you see other places where it's used a lot, and you can double click and it'll bring you to the places. Why in the text of this did they focus on the word bara? Okay, I'm going to do one more search and then we'll go on to other text. But like you see, it's a fully grammatically tagged. I typed the lexical form and it pulled out here all the different inflected forms of bara. Let's do the word Tzvaot, the Lord of, just the word host here. Tzvaot, I believe, or Tzava, I think is the lemma. There it is, because the word Tzvaot is plural, the Lord of hosts, or the Lord of the armies. This is in modern Hebrew, the word for army. And again, we find this frequently used about 94 times. And we'll look at a hit plot of that again. And we see again that it seems to be uniformly distributed because it refers to the Lord of hosts. And one of the other little nice features here, if we go back to the text here, is... let's see if I can find, there it is, right here in 1QP Habakkuk. Remember I showed the picture of Habakkuk in, I believe, our first section? Well, what the editor has done here is actually preserved the Paleo-Hebrew, so you see Adonai Tzvaot, the Lord of hosts, and he writes the word, the name of God, Yud-He, Vav-He, in the Paleo-Hebrew to represent how the text appeared. And you see this is actually, and this is the reference in the Habakkuk commentary that we talked about earlier. Okay, so let's move on now to some of the other texts in Qumran, but this is how we would use the Qumran non-biblical text. Let's now go to another text here. This is the entire manuscripts of both the biblical and non-biblical text, or actually I believe this is just the biblical text, but here we have them in what we call manuscript order. And I'm going to close these other graphs. We don't need them right now. This is the text 1Q1. This means Cave 1, Manuscript 1 of Qumran. And this is Genesis. And they probably thought logically at that time when they first sorted these that Genesis should be at the beginning. But this doesn't start with Genesis 1:1. And you know that because what we have done is insert the canonical reference so that I know that 1Q1, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. The camera may not pick this up. 1Q1 is Genesis 1:18. And then the end of Genesis 1:18. Then it starts with Genesis 1:19. And then the beginning of Genesis 1:20, all of that is the first line of 1Q1 and so on. So what we do here is show it in manuscript order, but we insert the canonical references here. But then we do also, if you purchase this Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, not only do you get the manuscript order, but we also electronically sorted out the text to show them in canonical order. And here is the reverse. And I wanted to show you this because we can also put other texts in parallel. Here's Genesis 1:1, and we see that the witnesses of Genesis 1:1 are 4Q2. I'll make this a little bit bigger here for the camera. We see Genesis 1:1 here, and inserted there is the manuscript number. 4Q2, fragment 1, has Genesis 1:1 in it. So does 4Q7, fragment 1, and in one of the words is actually in 4Q8. So we see here that these are the witnesses collated together in a canonical order so that each witness here, each reference shows all the witnesses from the Qumran corpus here. And because it's canonical, we can now in the second column add the Hebrew Bible, and there it is in parallel, and here's the English in parallel, so that you can now read Qumran, Hebrew Bible, and English in parallel. This scrolls just like everything else in accordance by verse, by chapter, or even by book. And since we're doing books, let's go to Exodus 20, chapter 20, and now you'll see that, especially, let's go and the next verse or two. Well, actually, 2010. Well, maybe we'll just go back to the beginning of the chapter. This is what I wanted to show you here. You notice in Exodus, with the beginning of the Ten Commandments, I think it's Deuteronomy that has a lot more, that there are lots of references here. 1Q2, 4Q11, 4Q22, and so forth. And I think if I go to the parallel passage in Deuteronomy 5, I believe it's chapter 5. No, it's, oh, I know what's the problem here. I'm just showing this word here. But anyway, but my point in showing you all of this here, you can see this in Deuteronomy, where there's occasionally many, many references, and in a few cases it actually goes several pages, because they even have little portions on phylacteries that they wrote some of these verses out of the Torah. So the point I'm trying to make is you can view these verses. They're all fully searchable. I could go here and look for the word in the manuscript order. The same word, we'll just do bara again. And there's all the cases where bara occurs in manuscript order. Or I could go here and look for all the cases where bara occurs in the canonical order. And you see indeed, for example, in Genesis 1:1, that we have bara highlighted twice because we have two witnesses of bara, but this is, again, these witnesses are all fully tagged, so they're searchable here, so that I can say, find me any place in the biblical manuscripts in canonical order where the word bara occurs. So this is really, really useful, and I don't believe that this kind of arrangement where you collate all the witnesses exists in print form to my knowledge. Okay, now I'd like to show you another example where the Qumran text, a biblical text, is very useful as a witness. And we'll go here and do a very simple example. Let me make the size a little bit bigger here. The example of Goliath. Everybody's heard of Goliath, okay, or even children's stories written about David and Goliath. He's mentioned in 1 Samuel chapter 17, and here we have a presentation of 4 columns, and we did this on purpose. First we have the English, and we actually searched in English for Goliath. We pulled up in the next column the Hebrew biblical text. Then we have the Qumran text. Then we have the Septuagint on the right. Now, why did I bring up this particular verse? Because there's a textual problem here. It says that Goliath in English was 6 cubits high. Well, a cubit is about a half a meter or a foot and a half. That would make him 9 foot tall. Well, it's possible he was 9 feet tall, but that's really high. And you'd think he's almost too bulky. If he's that tall, it would be hard for him to fight as a soldier being that tall. But he could have been that tall, and I don't want to say that was wrong necessarily. But here's the deal. Other manuscripts tell us something different. If you look in the Hebrew Bible, which was the basis for this translation, you see the word gavoho, his height, shesh amot. 6 cubits, which is a foot and a half, which would make him about 9 feet tall. But then if you go to the Qumran manuscript, it's not the same. Here you see Arba'a Amot, 4 cubits, which then would make him 6.5 feet, which is still tall, especially probably compared to the average height of men at that time, but he's not unreasonably tall. He'd be like a basketball player today. And then what's interesting is even the Septuagint, the Greek edition, also says the same thing. Tessaron, which is 6, and then Pecheon, which is cubits. So both the Septuagint and Qumran agree that Goliath could have been 6 feet tall, which from a reasonable point, and I don't want to say the Bible is wrong on he could have been 9 feet tall, but certainly there's evidence that he could have been 6.5 feet tall, which to us as humans today, it would be a little bit more reasonable. So this is an example of how Qumran can be used for textual criticism. Okay, now let's go on to another resource that Accordance has. So what I've shown you so far is Accordance resources for the Qumran non-biblical text, and then I've shown you the 2 ways we could do Qumran biblical text, either canonically or by manuscript order. And I might mention that we also have the complete Qumran, which includes also a few Greek texts, and we also have other fragments which I'm not showing you here. And we also have on Accordance the other Dead Sea Scrolls texts that are not part of the Qumran community. For example, the Bar Kokhba documents and the documents that they found at the excavations in the synagogue at Masada. But we're not going to take time to show that, but I mention those simply to say that, to my knowledge, we have Accordance has a complete corpus of all of these various Qumran manuscripts. But now I want to show you a few other resources that are not manuscripts in Accordance. Well, actually, they are manuscripts in a way. And this is the photographs. Now, today, you can go and get these photographs online. But we have on Accordance here the photographs that were taken in 1948 by James Trevor, who was the first one to photograph them in color film, and that wasn't easy at that time. And we have them here arranged together. Now, I want to show you here, for example, the Isaiah scroll, which we've mentioned many times. Here is the Isaiah scroll. Now, I took a couple of pictures. Here's the generic Isaiah scroll, and what we see here on the screen are the thumbnail. And if we click on it, we get a high-resolution photograph. We can save this photograph. We can put it in a picture window, but all I'm going to do now is just to zoom in, and you can zoom and zoom and zoom, and you can see the letters in quite a bit of detail here. And of course, I don't need to tell you, notice that the letters are unpointed, because vowel pointing wasn't invented until the Masoretes, much later in the latter probably 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th century was when the vowel pointing system was developed. And so here you see that all the manuscripts of Qumran, including the biblical manuscripts, were unpointed, but this shows you the details of the photographs. So this is the photographs here of Isaiah, and if you click on it, it gives a reference. It says this column 1 here of Isaiah is Isaiah 1 through 26. So I can click on that, and now I can see the text. I happen to hyperlink it to English so I can see the equivalent text that is shown in the photograph, or you could have it hyperlinked to any language or even to the Hebrew Bible if you wanted to see that text. So this is one of the ways, and the other way we do the photographs here is just like the manuscripts, we have canonical order. So here's an example of a very famous verse in Qumran, which also is quoted by John the Baptist that we mentioned earlier in our earlier parts, Isaiah 43. In English, a voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight the desert a highway for our Lord. We see this in the Hebrew text, and I'll make them again a little bit bigger here so you can see it on the camera easily here. This is the text, but what's interesting is we also have that same passage in the photographs of Isaiah here. And so I can now scroll here it is in the photograph, and I could zoom down, and the only trick is you got to be able to read the Hebrew here, find out where it is in the photograph. Well, anyway, there's the photograph, and as I scroll it, I'm sorry, this is, let me just click on that here. Okay, that's the manuscript order, getting it mixed up with the reference. It's 1Q Isaiah 33 is what it's called, and here again is the reference, Isaiah 42 through 28, which means it actually would be toward the beginning of Isaiah. But here's the thing I want to really show you. Let's start scrolling through here chapter by chapter on accordance, except that we need to show all of Isaiah, not just verse 40. Okay, there we go. And as you scroll here, the manuscripts follow because they're now in the order of the text and are being treated as a reference tool. So if I were studying Isaiah and looked at the Qumran text, the Masoretic text, and the English or Septuagint, if you so desire, the photographs will follow with me so that I can actually see on the original photographs here and examine the photographs for myself to see what the text actually shows here. So that's the photographs. Now, I want to show another couple of resources on accordance that we have. One of them is actually unique to accordance. It does not exist in book form, and this is what we call the accordance, the DSS index. This is like a bibliography of all the scrolls, and to my knowledge, it does cover all of the scrolls. And what we've done is put together a catalog of all of the Qumran scrolls. And here's an example, 4Q45. Its alternate name is 4Q Paleo-Deuteronomy, which tells me that it's the book of Deuteronomy written in the Paleo-Hebrew script. And then it lists all the related manuscripts, and you can click on these as hyperlinks to say, here's other manuscripts that show similar material here. And the very first one is 1Q4. We click on that, and it now jumps to the bibliography of 1Q4, which is also Deuteronomy. And I'm going to go back here to where I came from. And then it gives you a description. It gives you the verse references, tells you which fragments they're on. And if you put the cursor over the verse references, you see at the bottom, it gives you the text in any language. I happen to have it in English here. Tells you what the language is, tells you the paleography, what was its date. It's estimated based on the writing style to be written 100 to 25 BCE. And then it gives you the bibliography. Here's the DJD is the most important because that's sort of the authoritative reference for the Dead Sea Scrolls, the discoveries in the Judean desert. And it tells you where you can find in the DJD a discussion, a more detailed discussion about this particular manuscript. And like all tools, everything is searchable. I can search it here by reference, which is what I did here. I could search by titles. I could search by contents. I could search by, all of these things have a separate field. I could even say, let's do language. And now I'm going to say, put in Greek. And now I can find all the manuscripts that have Greek. So here, for example, is called Septuagint Leviticus. It's written in Greek and it follows a Septuagint very closely. So now I found in my reference all the manuscripts here in my bibliography, and I can scroll through them, which were written in Greek, except that I think I'm showing the whole thing. Let me just, so many ways you can, it's showing all text. It really should just show the paragraphs, or the articles rather, and now we can filter that out and just show the manuscripts that are written in Greek here. And it's not that many of them. Let's see, what does it say here? It found 70 manuscripts that are written in Greek. So this is an example, and you can even focus this even a little bit more. Now the last thing I want to show you, this was the Dead Sea Scrolls Index, a unique tool that isn't available anywhere else in either electronic or print form to my knowledge. And now we can go here to the last resource we have, and this is what we call Dead Sea Scrolls. It was published by Erdman's publisher, and these are a series of essays that deal with all sorts of related topics. For example, if I read here from its Eschatology, Messianism, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Origins of the Bible, the Dead Sea Scrolls and Christian Origins, Religion in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Bible at Qumran. These are different scholars, and the one that I want to focus on is what we talked about earlier, is here's an article on the Dead Sea Scrolls and Christian origin, and they have a whole article on the relationship of John the Baptist. We talked earlier in our second segment about John the Baptist, and he does agree that we don't have anything specifically that mentioned John in the scrolls, even though there was the rumor that he was mentioned. But the name John actually does appear in the scrolls twice, and I found that by searching. But most scholars don't believe it's referring to John the Baptist. It's referring to other Johns. But this scholar says reasons for considering it a plausible hypothesis and are the following 7 reasons. So he gives 7 reasons why it's very plausible that John the Baptist was at Qumran and probably came out. Maybe he walked out, maybe he was expelled, we don't know. But here's a much more detailed article on what I mentioned briefly on why it's very plausible that John the Baptist, and he even continues and talks about did Jesus know of the Essenes? And he actually says presumably he did, but I'm not going to go into the details. You can read the book for yourself. But these are very good articles that focus more on the details of Qumran, and in particular on the details of the relationship to Qumran to the Bible, which is something that I did in a more abbreviated form. So anyway, these are just some of the resources of Qumran. I only focused on the ones that are available on Accordance, so that if you're interested in going to more depth on Qumran or on the scrolls, we have the resources on Accordance. Thank you.